So let's review our somebody wanted but so chart before we dive into the questions. Somebody wanted to drive their car, but it means traffic congestion. But new transit has to replace and eliminate driving, or people have to reduce their driving. So, as the researcher is arguing, we have to take unpopular measures. We cut energy consumption, perhaps make driving less pleasant, all to reduce cars on the road and make travel more inconvenient. So our environment is better. So our environment is healthier and better. Somebody wanted, but so. Now let's have a look at the questions. If we did a good job on the somebody wanted but so chart, we won't have to look back unless it's something like question 16, where we need to provide evidence. But let's start with question 11. The main purpose of the passage is to provide support for the claim that efforts to reduce traffic actually increase traffic. The author did make mention of that, and the researcher made mention of that, so I won't get rid of that yet. But I'm not 100% sure that's our answer. B, dispute the widely held belief that building and improving mass transit systems is good for the environment. The researcher argued the exact opposite. We have to get rid of that. C, discuss the negative environmental consequences of car-focused development and suburban sprawl. The article wasn't about negative environmental consequences, so we do have to get rid of that one. So we've narrowed it down to A and D. Let's read D. Argue that one way to reduce the negative environmental effects of traffic is to make driving less agreeable. I really do believe that we wrote that down already on our somebody wanted but so chart, and therefore that's our theme. So we're going to choose that one. Our theme. Reduce negative environmental effects, driving less agreeable. Number 12. Which choice best supports the idea that the author assumes that, all things being equal, people would rather drive than take mass transit? This is our first one that I'm going to introduce the question order rule to. Technically, this is only our second question. And the order of questions goes in order of the passage. So questions at the beginning, like the second question, will come from the first section of the passage. And then questions later on will come later. And the last few questions will always come from the end of the passage. The question order rule. Since this is only the second question, it's very reasonable to assume that the answer is going to come from the very first few lines. So let's review again what we're looking for. Which choice best supports the idea that the author Number 12, which choice best supports the idea that the author assumes that, all things being equal, people would rather drive than take mass transit? Actually, I do believe I have looked at this one before. In A, lines 1 through 5, building, ending with a car. Building good transit isn't a bad idea, but it can actually backfire if the new trains and buses merely clear space on highway lanes for those who would prefer to drive, a group that, historically, has included almost everyone with access to a car. Everyone that has a car wants to drive. People would rather drive than take mass transit. I'm going to choose A. Number 13 is my favorite type of question. This is our most nearly means. There are 9 most nearly There are 9 most nearly means questions on every single SAT test. Again, I told you, these tests are all alike. The one from October 2019 is a lot like the one from October 2020. Again, I told you these tests are all alike. The test questions from October 2019 are just the same as the test questions from October 2018. And I know that they're going to be the same in October 2020. As I told you, the test questions are all the same. This test, again, is from October 2019. These test questions are the same test questions that were on the October 2018 test. And I can reasonably assume that you will have most nearly means, 9 of them, on the October 2020 test. So let's learn how to do most nearly means. These are simple sentence completions. Simple in that we're looking for simple words. As used in lines 8 through 9, backed up most nearly means. So remember, we're taking the SAT test. The writers know that we understand we're reading a passage about traffic. So they give us simple words like backed up, thinking that we're not going to take the time to look back on lines 8 through 9. We're going to assume that backed up just means traffic congestion. And then we're going to assume we know that, and we're going to go right down and choose the correct one. You're not going to do that. Here's what you're going to do. The very first thing when you see a most nearly means is cover up your potential answers. We're doing that because I don't want you to fall in love with a word. The worst thing you can do during the SAT test is fall in love. So let's keep from falling in love by covering up the potential answers. As used in lines 8 through 9, backed up most nearly means. And now we will go to lines 8 through 9. Find the word backed up and completely cross it out. When I mean completely cross it out, I mean as though you just forgot what the word was. That crossed out. Now we're going to reread the sentence, and we're going to come up with a very simple logical word that could take the place of the, oh, I forgot. What word was it that we crossed out? So that means that a new transit system has to be by something that impels that means that a new transit system has to be by something that impels complementary reductions in car use. We need to come up with a simple logical word to take its place. So that means that a new transit system has to be championed. Then we're going to come up with a simple logical word that is a synonym for this word. We're not changing the meaning of the sentence. We're just trying to come up with a very simple logical word that can take its place. So that means that a new transit system has to be championed by something that impels complementary reductions in car use. Or that means that a new transit system has to be supported by something that impels complementary reductions in car use. Can you come up with a simpler word? Advocated by? So we have 3 words. Now we're going to take our simple logical word and look back. Again, we haven't looked at any of these words yet. Championed, supported, or advocated. Supported. I like that. Copied, that doesn't mean championed, supported, or advocated. Substituted, that doesn't mean championed, supported, or advocated. Or jammed, that doesn't mean championed, supported, or advocated. So we're going to go with the word supported. Remember, the word has to be simple and it has to be logical. You're not trying to change the meaning or the context of the sentence at all. In fact, beware, don't change the meaning or the context of the sentence. Come up with a very simple logical word that can take the place of the word that you removed, like backed up. It works every time. Question 14. In the first paragraph, the author concedes that his recommendations are, and again, they're making reference to the first paragraph, and that means a lot of students are going to look back to the first paragraph to remind them what they wrote. You don't need to, though, because you have your somebody wanted by so chart. This is all you need to remember. So in the first paragraph, the author concedes that his recommendations are costly to implement. I don't remember any budgetary concerns, so I'm actually going to get rid of that one. Not widely supported. I'm pretty sure I wrote that one down. Make travel inconvenient, make driving less pleasant. Unpopular. Not widely supported. Yes. Strongly opposed by experts. There was nothing like that in the text. We can get rid of that completely. Environmentally harmful in the short term. Again, there was nothing that said that in the text. We can absolutely get rid of that. And we have B. Number 15. Based on the passage, how would the author most likely characterize many attempts to improve traffic? They are doomed to fail because most people like driving too much to change their habits. Now, I like the last part of it. He did say that over and over and over again. People like driving too much to change their habits. However, I don't remember anything about they're doomed to fail. This is the SAT test. And I think what's going to happen if a student reads something like this, they're going to be too scared to get rid of it. I remember it's not my theme, but I've taken hundreds of these tests. So I'll keep it just so that you don't get nervous. B, they overestimate how tolerant people are of long route commutes. Well, that doesn't answer the question. Based on the passage, how would the author most likely characterize many attempts to improve traffic, not overestimating how tolerant people are of the long commutes? So we're going to get rid of that. They are well-intentioned, but ultimately lead to environmental harm. Now, that environmental piece there, that was a really big part of the researchers' purpose for doing research. So I like this one a lot. I'm going to keep it. The author most likely characterized the many attempts to improve traffic. They will only work if they make driving more economical and more productive. Well, driving becomes more economical, then there's going to be more traffic. And traffic, as we know, begets traffic. So we're going to get rid of that one. So again, we're looking how the author most likely characterized many attempts to improve traffic. They're doomed to fail because most people like driving too much, or they're well-intentioned, but they ultimately lead to environmental harm. Improving traffic means more cars on the road, and thus more environmental harm. 16 is one we're going to have to look back on. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? But let's have a look at why we're looking back. Remember, we don't go back unless we completely know why we're looking back. They are well-intentioned, but ultimately lead to environmental harm. So we're looking for they're well-intentioned, but they ultimately lead to environmental harm. We're going to start on line 8, and that in tolls. That means that a new transit system has to be supported by something that impels complementary reductions in car use, say the physical elimination of traffic lanes or the conversion of existing roadways into bikes or bus lanes, ideally in combination with higher fuel taxes, parking fees, and tolls. That doesn't say anything about environmental harm. Line 21 through 25, that enough. That tolerance has grown in recent decades, and not just in the United States, but it isn't unlimited. And even people who don't seem to mind spending half their day in a car eventually reach a point where finally enough is enough. It doesn't say anything about environmental harm. I'm going to have to get rid of that one. Line 29 through 38. And we're reading in between if and in worse. If, in a misguided effort to do something of environmental value, ding, municipalities take steps that make long-distance car commuting faster or more convenient by adding lanes, building bypasses, employing traffic control measures that make it possible for existing roads to accommodate more cars with fewer delays, replacing toll booths with radio-based systems that don't require drivers even to slow down, we actually make the sprawl problem worse. Yes, I like that one. And 59 through 62, moving use. Remember, we're looking for environmental harm. Moving drivers out of cars and into other forms of transportation can have the same effect if existing traffic lanes are kept in service, road space begets road use. Doesn't say anything about environmental harm, so we're going to get rid of that one. And I like C. 17. According to the passage, reducing commuting time for drivers can have which of the following effects? A, drivers become more productive employees than they previously were. I don't think they said anything about rise in production at work. So we're going to get rid of that one. B, mass transit gets extended farther into suburban areas than it previously was. That was true, and they did mention that. However, if mass transit gets extended farther into suburban areas. B, mass transit gets extended farther into suburban areas than it previously was. There actually wasn't any mention in the passage about mass transit being extended, so we're going to get rid of that. Mass transit carries fewer passengers and receives less government funding than it previously did. Again, that was never mentioned in the passage. Or D, drivers become willing to live farther from their places of employment than they previously were. And they did say that over and over and over again. In fact, we have it in our Somebody But So chart. So there's 17 done. 18, another most nearly means. So remember, our very first thing we're going to do is cover that up. We don't want to fall in love with any of our options. As used in line 66, promotes most nearly means. So we're going to look back to line 66. Completely shade out the word promotes. Read the sentence, and while we're reading it, come up with a very simple logical word that can go in its place. No one has ever, it's kind of like supported, a transit scheme by arguing that it would make traveling less convenient. No one has ever, I like supported. Supported a transit scheme by arguing that it would make traveling less convenient. Just for fun. No one's ever backed up a transit scheme by arguing that it would make traveling less convenient either, have they? So we're going to take supported and backed up. Careful not to fall in love. And we're going to find the one that most nearly means supported or backed up. Upgrades doesn't mean supported or backed up. Serves doesn't mean supported or backed up. Advocates means supported or backed up. Develops Doesn't necessarily mean supported or backed up. And we have our answer. The last three questions on here are about the table. So now we finally know why we're going to look at the table. Before we wouldn't look at it. According to figure 1, how many vehicles traveled on the altered road through the Southampton city center per day before the route was altered? So the main thing we're only looking for is altered road, Southampton city center, and before the route was altered. One of the biggest mistakes that I've seen students make is looking at the wrong figure. Go figure. Okay, so vehicles per day on altered road. And we're looking at through the Southampton city center before the route was altered. So we're only looking here. And Southampton city center. So our answer has to be 5,316. Couldn't be any easier. 5,316. We're not going to think any more about that one. Number 20. Did the data in figure 1 support or weaken the argument, the author of the passage, and why? Well, here's an important thing to remember. I have yet to find data that doesn't support the passage. The data supports the passage. The data supports the passage. Support, support. We're going to keep support. Weaken, we're going to get rid of it. It never weakens it. Or weaken. We're going to get rid of it. It doesn't weaken it. There's a lot of words here, so I'm going to stay true to my theme. You want to remember what the theme is? We want to take unpopular measures, cut energy assumption, make driving less pleasant, reduce cars on the road, and make travel very inconvenient. Does it support it? A, support, because the data show that merely moving drivers out of cars can induce traffic. Moving drivers out of cars will not bring on traffic. Moving drivers out of cars will reduce traffic. So it doesn't even make any sense. Now we've narrowed it down to B, but just to be sure, because I know you're skeptical, we'll read B. Support, because the data show that reducing road capacity can lead to a net reduction in traffic. Yep. Reducing road capacity, reducing road capacity, making the road more narrow, making you stop for tolls, and making it less convenient will, as a result, lead to a reduction in traffic, and therefore better for the environment. Now we're going to go to figure 2. Based on figure 2, the engineers surveyed were most skeptical of the idea that in the event of a reallocation of road space, drivers would change. So this is interesting. Most skeptical. So if they're most skeptical, that means they're probably saying no. Idea that the event of a reallocation of road space, drivers would change. Let's have a look what they mean by that. Really, we haven't looked at it. We have no idea. Let's have a look at figure 2. Make that more clear. So figure 2 looks like survey of transportation engineers' predictions of drivers' behavior. Okay, those are the guys that are most skeptical. Could a significant road space reallocation result in some people changing? Okay, so yes is shaded in gray. Yes, in exceptional circumstances is white. No is dark, and they don't know is the other white. But we want to focus again on most skeptical. Most skeptical, now that I've seen now that I've seen the table, means no or don't know. So which one is mostly no or don't know? That is not. That is not. That is not. That is not. This is the one farthest to the left, 60% of no or don't know. And therefore, the answer has to be their driving style. When they travel, their means of traveling, how often they make a journey, or their driving style. Simple, logical, and that's the end of the second passage in the first reading section.